anime is doing incredibly well right now. That is to say that anime has garnered a massive fan base, and because of that gathering of a massive fan base, taking a lot of Western people who would normally be involved in Western entertainment instead are now turning their attention to Japanese entertainment. It has caused a lot of the Western entertainment giants to try to copy that, to either make their own animes or commission animes, anime studios to create, animes with their IPs. But I think the major issue that they're trying to get to, and the reason why these things are not going to be necessarily successful, is that Japanese anime, which is what it is, anime is Japanese animation. It is not simply an art style, it is specifically Japanese animation. And it contains Japanese traditions and Japanese ideas, Japanese cultural, quirks and kinks that are very important to the Japanese people. And I think that trying to impose a Western point of view upon them really doesn't work. There's always something that's a little bit off when Westerners attempt to copy that. And what I think, again, I don't think it's a terrible, stupid idea. There are certain elements I think that can be taken from there, but that's what we have to do. Instead of trying to copy it, the comic book company should be trying to take certain elements of it and add it towards the overall story. Essentially, take an element of it and add it towards what is already existing, and then you create something completely and utterly new. Welcome back, Tiger Pack. It's your boy, Black Tiger Talks, and I'm here to talk about specifically two major things that the Western comic book industry, that includes the comics, the movies, and the TV shows, can take. Two elements they can take from the anime industry and the manga industry. Now, the first of these elements, I would say, should be how they do action. You see, the Western comic book industry and their movies, that includes the big two, and then of course, as well as, indie people. If you're making an indie thing, you should look into this as well. And the main thing that they kind of fail at, I see, is they fail at getting the fight scenes properly. See, anime really focuses on these encounters-based fight scenes. And notice I said fight scenes. See, thing is, when it comes to the Western way of doing it, we look at not fight scenes, we look at action set pieces. So the action is centered around a specific room or a specific area, and then the action is it's action. It's not a fight scene necessarily. It's like, maybe you're falling around, maybe you're, dealing with, I don't know, animals attacking, or there's all these different, buildings falling down, all these different elements that kind of interrupt the actual fight scene itself that's happening, which is kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. But I think that for comics, I would say if I were them, I would focus on going back to actually putting these fight scenes together. Now, of course, you're going to have to make sure these characters actually work together. That's one of the biggest things that makes these fight scenes do very well. It's not just the animation is good, it's not just that the environment is good, but they have the main focus of the scene itself. Instead of it being focused on the area, the environment, on different little things, and making it very quick and very punchy, anime focuses on the emotion of the fight scene. They focus on the characters involved and let those characters really shine. And they, again, will build up an entire, arc will be built up to that fight scene, and then that fight scene will take place, and it will be absolutely epic because they'll focus on all those major things. I think it's very good for anime to do the similar thing, to focus on those things. I said this before in a previous video, that I remember seeing a comic in which Thor, it was a Thor comic, and he was fighting against his brother, his half-brother, Tyr, God of War. And the idea that built up to the fight was that Tyr, the God of War, had been influenced by this oblivion situation, and he was now incredibly powerful. He usually only has one arm, but that new other arm was regrown into this ability of pure oblivion. He was able to erase gods from existence, make sure there's no afterlife, no Valhalla for them, so to speak. So you really built him up to be really, really powerful. But how did you deal with him? Well, the way the story was set up was that he had to fight not Thor, but other Thor's siblings. And the comic Thor has a whole bunch of siblings that are running around. In fact, he gathered them all together to find this specific sibling of Tyr. And he had this one sibling with, really powerful arrows. He can just shoot arrows like crazy. And what happened is this guy decided to just shoot arrows continuously at this guy. And meanwhile, one of his other siblings, this new character, is she's like half Surtur. She's the powers of like Surtur, the fire demon, to a certain extent. And she just like had to breathe fire on him while the other guy shot arrows, and they kept him in place until Thor got there, basically. And the thing is, it was just so underwhelming, ultimately speaking. And I remember telling my one of my brothers about this, and I told one of my friends about this as well, that the scene in an anime would have been a massive, long fight. I think this whole scene I'm talking about took like an issue or two. While in an anime, this would have been a massive, huge fight scene where you would have had tactics being done. The goal would have been the same, you know. The goal would have been hold this guy off until Thor gets here with whatever power that Thor needs. Thor is trying to get the rune, like tier specific rune, and deal with them. Well, in an anime, you would have had them doing everything they could. Each of the different, you know, siblings getting their chance to really do their best. All of them finding their very hardest to the very end to hold this, you know, guy off until Thor got there. And then when Thor got there, it would have been a massive impact, massive fight scene in and of itself. The issues should have been like 20 issues almost of fighting that an anime would have squeezed out of this arc. While meanwhile, for, you know, this comic, it was a single issue. Like, I think it was one issue when it came to the final fight. And it was like 2 pages. Like, it was terrible. And that's a massive difference between the way that anime does it. The anime focuses on the relationship, so that fight scene would have been massive. I said the same thing about like various cartoons. I was a big guy into cartoons, of Avengers cartoons in my youth. You know, I looked at the Justice League cartoons. They did a better job of it, but I would tell, you know, looking at the different fight scenes that take place, one of the most popular fight scenes is, you know, the Thor versus Hulk, Wolverine versus Hulk type fight scenes. And I was telling, again, one of my friends about this. I was like, if this was an anime, you would have had, every time Thor and Hulk fought, it would have been major. It would have been massive. The fight scene itself would have went on for like at least 20 minutes of just pure fight scene time. You know, it would have been different tactics being used here and there. And just the thing about it, while that is very true, it's not necessarily altogether a fully anime thing, to be honest, but I would say it's mostly an anime thing. Anime's kind of brought it in there. But of course, you see on YouTube right now, there are YouTube animators who do just fight scenes. And these fight scenes last for a great long time, full of different tactics, full of storytelling within that fight scene to make it engaging to watch. And I think that if the comic book industry, that includes the movies, whether it be the MCU or something like that, whether it be the TV shows, if they want to get some of these fans back from anime, one of the things they have to do is they have to make sure these fight scenes, these are at that level. Again, I'm talking about fight scenes, not action set pieces. You can have your action set pieces, but I think you really need to focus on actually making those fight scenes massive. If you look at, say, one of their best movies, Captain America, you know, Civil War, one of the best parts about it people always talk about is the fight scene. They talk about specifically Captain America and, you know, Bucky versus Iron Man, because the emotion of that fight scene was great with the different tactics being used and whatnot. That was an amazing, you know, fight scene. People love it. Same thing goes for Winter Soldier versus Captain America in the Captain America Winter Soldier movie. People love that fight scene because ultimately speaking, you got to see a whole bunch of different tactics being used, you know, moves and counter moves as they, you know, try to both accomplish their goals. I think that's a very important thing to add back into your movies. If you want, ultimately speaking, superhero movies do have a lot to do with action, but I would say fight scenes are a bigger part of it. So if I were them, I'd do that. Now, some of these movies do a really good job of giving these characters, you know, the classic, I remember one YouTube reported as a fly swatting fight scene, where it's, you know, a fight scene where you're taking on a bunch of random goons, you're just beating them up easily. And James Gunn does that a lot. You saw it in the Superman movie, you saw that in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. But ultimately speaking, you want to do a little bit more, I think. Those fight scenes are cool and whatnot, but there's only so many ways to do it. Versus when you have two characters and you actually let them use their powers, that's really cool. Like, for example, the way that these, you know, different fight scenes on YouTube will use Hulk, they'll make him what he's supposed to be. They boil it down to the essence of what Hulk is, which is this massive, powerful monster who gets stronger and stronger as the fight goes on. That should be an element of a fight scene. Imagine when Thor and Hulk fight, but that's the main element of it, where Thor is more in this idea that Hulk is just, no matter what Thor does, Hulk just keeps getting up. He just keeps getting up, and Thor has to pull out more and more different moves to try to put him down. Maybe at first Thor is really prideful, being this, you know, god of thunder, thinks that he can take on Hulk easily. But as the fight progresses, he starts getting more and more, you know, worried. Be like, oh wow, this guy is taking every single one of these powerful strikes. I gotta start pulling out all the stops in order to take this guy down. That would be interesting to see. And I remember one of their first fight scenes. I've been the first larger fight scenes. It's a really old comic. I forget what it is. Maybe I'll put it on the screen if I remember where I found it. But like they had a massive fight, and it was a very similar to that. I remember one point Thor's literally on the ground saying, "Man, this guy just no matter what I throw at this guy, he won't get up." So it shows that old comics did have that element to it, and that's part of what made them good. You have to look back at the glory days and understand what you did right and what you did wrong. And I think one thing that we did wrong recently is that we've gone away from that when it comes to the movies, when it comes to cartoons, when it comes to the comics themselves. We've gone away from having that massive pulse pounding action. So I think that's a very important element of it. But as important as that is, there's another bigger element, not bigger, but similarly sized element that needs to be addressed. And that is the subject of legacy. See, when it comes to anime, they understand legacy and long-term effects. For some reason, comic books and superheroes are completely against having long-term effects in their movies and TV shows and in their comics to go with it. They don't like to progress. So you'll have a writer who will do some interesting, cool things, but usually the next writer will come up and just destroy what was there. And that's just so frustrating to see. I think they need to have like a better editors who are going to come in there and edit down those stories and make sure we have a clear and obvious progression. Let these characters actually grow up, let them be bigger people. You see this in like different animes, like for example, Dragon Ball Z's been going on for all these years, right? And what do you see? Goku started out as a child, as a literal child. Now he's not just a full-grown man, but he's a full-grown man married with a kid. His kid Gohan is fighting with him on the battlefield with another kid, I think Goten. And you said the same thing for people like Vegeta and whatnot. People have progressed and moved on. I want to see that from the characters. Now, of course, not every character can do that well. I think someone like Spider-Man, I don't know if you want to go too far with that. I think you should go a little bit far, but not, the idea of Spider-Man married with kids, they're doing that in the Ultimate Universe. So it is a thing that can happen, but I wonder if it goes away from the core of the character. But still, I understand that there's some elements to it. Not every character is the same here, but characters like I just mentioned before, Thor, that should happen for him. I think the same thing should happen for Superman. Superman's had a son in the past, so has Batman, and they tried to go a little further with that. I think they should go fully into that. Literally go into it. Let Superman grow up. Let him have kids, because he's supposed to be an ideal superhero. He's supposed to be the American dream. Let him have a couple of kids. Let these kids fight with the old man, and let the next generation pop up. I think that's very important. I think that's something that the comic books could start to do. And one other thing I'll mention, when they try to do this, they usually try to make that relationship between the father and the son, or the daughter and the mother, so strained. I think that we're so invested in emotional drama that unfortunately we lose some of the bigger and more important and beautiful elements that should be there. I think instead of going to the drama, we should go into the heartwarming and epicness that could take place. And for like a character like Superman, for example, I think that you should still focus on letting Superman be the main character. Despite the fact he has his son there, don't make the son usurp his role as main character for the entire time. Make sure Superman is still the main character as long as Superman can continue to do things. And then at some point, I understand with the idea of letting those characters come from being the main character to eventually relinquishing the title to their replacement. But at that point, we've actually been with that replacement for a good amount of time, a good amount of years, and we're accepting of him taking the role. And then our main character will move into that more mentor type role, and that would be really, really cool to see. I'm not gonna lie, that would be pretty epic to see. But I think that's something that I think Western comics should get into, especially the MCU. I know they want to continue making all these characters and all these actors do this until they're like 50 years old, but I think that it would be smart to allow some of these characters to move into that role. I always thought, again, I hate to really focus in on Thor again, but I hate the fact that Thor as a character, they sent him out in Love and Thunder to be this random guy out in the universe. I think that was a terrible idea. I think it would have been much smarter. This began an Endgame, to be honest, to allow Thor to be the king of Asgard while on Earth, and make sure that he has other characters that can take up that role. Imagine having, instead of the MCU being like it is right now, imagine you had Thor as a character who's like sitting on the side, who is this, taking the Odin role, but in a, just being a better guy than Odin at that role. After all, he's supposed to be worthy. So that would be very interesting. That's something that you could do to try to transition. That way you can have actors who play the characters come back, but instead of having to fight again, they can instead enter that better, more adult, more elder role, the role of the wise elder, essentially. And that's a role that's really missing from a lot of these situations. They want to make the elder like they still got it, but it's like that's not the point. The point isn't that they still got it. The point can be that they moved on and are moving to a different place and a different role, and letting a new main character take the place that's part of life. After all, these characters are supposed to represent life or certain elements of life. And I think it's a really interesting and smart idea to let them move on like that. But yeah, I think that those two elements, legacy and these fight scenes, I think they need to add both of those things back in there in a better way. I think that they utilize them properly. I think that no matter what the medium is, whether it be comics, whether it be cartoons, whether it be, the movies, I think they'll be able to make a comeback in all those areas, because ultimately speaking, as I mentioned before, Japanese anime and manga, those are Japanese things. Those are things that are better suited towards people from that culture. And I think that they have a massive advantage as being someone from Western culture when you're doing things to Westerners. And so you have that advantage, but you're not using it right, basically. And because you're not using it right, other people are deciding to go towards alternatives to the overall, to what, would be their main choice, essentially. And again, I think this is a good shot for indie people who want to come in there and do their own thing. I think the way you do it is by doing something new. One last thing I'll mention, to just give a final element to it, is, you saw this from Invincible. Invincible came as an indie, and it took the fight scenes to a new level. They added in specifically having a massive amount of violence, these explosive violent moments to their overall formula. And because of that, they were able to move on. And they had legacy in the same way I talked about. People have to grow and change. Things would happen, an event would happen, and it would actually affect the universe long term. That's what you want to get towards. Now, again, you don't have to follow Invincible specifically, but going towards that is a much smarter idea than falling towards what they're doing right now. Anyway, that's the video. Like and subscribe for further content. And until next time, stay ferocious, Tigerback.